Welcome to the Vantage HR Influencers Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Vantage Circle, the simple and AI-powered rewards and recognition platform for employee engagement.
Pride is a celebration of identity, gender and race, sexuality, and every other minority. It is a fight for equal human rights, tolerance, and acceptance, especially at work. It also refers to the achievements of the community members towards equal rights. Hello listeners, welcome to the Vantage Influencers Podcast. I'm your host, Shushmita. Today's episode is all about fighting inequality and discrimination in the workplace because it's June and we are discussing Pride Month today. Pride is an opportunity to promote diversity and inclusion alongside employee engagement in the workplace. It is the key to an impeccable company culture, attracting diverse talents. Hence, the Pride Month celebration is an essential D&I initiative. And to shed light on the topic, we have with us Saswati Sinha, the Head of Human Resources India at Evalueserve. Welcome to the show, Saswati.
Thank you very much, Ishmita. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much for being here in this conversation today, Saswati. And it's June and we are celebrating Pride Month in this month. And before we start talking about the actual topic today, Saswati, it would be great if you could brief us about yourself.
Sure, Sushmita. I'm Saswati Sinha. I head the HR department for India for Evalueserve, which is into research, data analytics, and artificial intelligence, AI. I have gotten on more than 24 years of experience now in HR, and I have worked across industries in IT, media, APO, and in my last stint, just before joining Evalueserve, I was heading HR and legal department for Chain India, which is a Samsung Group company. I am from and settled in Delhi NCR for the last 26 years.
Great. So talking about Pride Month, the first thing that I would like to know from you is that what is the true meaning of diversity and inclusion for you?
You know, Sushmita, whenever we talk about any inclusion or any kind of removal of biases, I always feel that why are we even talking about it? It should have been hygiene by now. We should not have unconscious biases. We should be inclusive of each and every community. That should have been part of our whole framework, and we should not consciously think of driving it. It should be just basic hygiene. So in my mind, the ideal situation is you don't have to think about this. You are focusing on talent. You are focusing on creating connections and relationships without thinking where the person is coming from. That is actually the true meaning, where you don't have to think about it. Just building connections and relationships.
Okay, so tell me, Saswati, why, in your opinion, why are diversity and inclusion initiatives important in the workplace?
Well, if we are talking about workplace, then diversity and inclusion becomes one of the critical aspects. And that is the reason I say that we will reach true level of diversity and inclusion where we are not consciously driving it, and it is hygiene. Because it is a given fact that only when different types of individuals with different types of thinking and orientation come together, that we can drive innovation and creativity. Those are the buzzwords, right? Same type of thinking cannot drive innovation and creativity. It can only reach a certain level. If you have to go up the value chain, you need to have diversity in your thinking. You need to be able to include different type of thought process to move forward. And that's true not only for workplace, for society also as a whole.
Right. Very true. So you believe that the LGBTQI plus community is still, facing workplace discrimination even after years of change that has been taking place in the workplaces?
Unfortunately, yes. Even today,
that means even after so much of efforts and so much of your conscious efforts, there is still that discrimination, still that inequality that is prevalent in workplaces.
Yes, and this is not a conscious, inequality. And at least I can speak for organizations I have worked
Right.
with, it's not a conscious bias. Any community bias that we have is actually more deep-rooted, and that's why the change is difficult to come by. It goes back to our whole societal framework, how we have grown up, what is the cultural scenario. Even today, if you go to forget the sexual orientation of any individual, even the gender diversity we are still driving, and we have not achieved the milestones that we wanted to. Simply because if you even go to the interior parts of the country in India today, also there is a feeling girls don't need to be educated after a certain level, right?
Yeah.
They don't need to be included. Now, people who are coming out of those communities into the workplaces, they will not suddenly change their mindset.
For sure, yes.
It takes years. It's a mind shift. It's your whole, what you believe in. It's your belief shift.
It's taking generations to realize that. Yeah.
It takes time, but our responsibility, I think, as organizations and as individuals, is to drive this in every way we can. Create the awareness so the mindset is shifted of many, many more people.
Yeah.
Responsible.
Yeah, and also celebrating the Pride Month, Saswati, it is also in a deeply correlated with things like employee engagement, recognition, acceptance, isn't it? I mean, it has been an essential part of our every D&I initiative.
Yes, 100%. So whenever we are any organization which is driving D&I, and I think most evolved organizations are doing that at this point of time, we consciously say that we are forming the Pride Month is consciously celebrated. We have community that in Evalueserve we are saying that we please join. We have formed groups for this community and saying that please join in these groups, talk to each other. We are creating awareness through podcasts, through panel discussions. Our leaders are talking about it. We are sending across mailers. Our focus is more about education, awareness, and removing the unconscious bias.
Right.
There is no conscious bias, I feel, nowadays, more and more as we are talking about it. It's more unconscious, what we also don't even realize. So that will only get mitigated through education and awareness, and that we are consciously driving across the organization.
Yeah. So as you have mentioned what you guys are doing at Evalueserve, but would you like to highlight any few other ways as to how workplaces can celebrate this month at work and show their support for the LGBT community and employees? Like we see many of the organizations, taking part in diversity training, pride events at work, or taking parts in pride walks. So what other things do you want to, suggest to the listeners, to the managers, HRs who are listening to us today to celebrate the Pride Month?
Yes. So the initiatives that most organizations have found effective, I think first is, like I say, that the awareness and education that can be through internal panel discussions, getting in external speakers to talk about it, introducing how it helps, what is in it for the organization as a whole to ensure that this community feels included. That is the first aspect. Second is obviously what we are also doing is and organizations have found it very effective when we hear the stories. So we encourage people to talk about themselves, their stories, what they have gone through and what is it they would want from the rest of the organization so that they can grow. It creates empathy and it creates more connections with the majority group inside the organization and outside too, right? Third thing is obviously engagement activities around it, fun activities around it, which includes this community, and together we create certain, shall we say, when we work together in certain projects or small little games, activities, etc. I think some of the few things which we have found in organizations are very effective to create inclusiveness for this community. I think that works well.
Brilliant, Saswati.
I also believe, that just changing, just to add to this, sorry to cut in, but
sure.
That just creating, just changing the logo or putting in the rainbow and all, these are all good. I think we have been doing it year after year after year. But now more than that, I think it's required that in our whole fabric, it's not just about the month of June. In our whole fabric, we should now weave in the inclusion part of it. Without even, shall we say, for example, let me give an example. Our hiring process. In our hiring process also, we have over a period of time said that, 30% should be women who should be hired if you have a position. The same way we should drive this. We should say that 20% wherever people are in countries, wherever people are able to disclose their orientation, we should then ensure that percentage, they are brought into the mainstream. So that slowly it's not just about including them. It is about just talent and skills.
Right.
Nobody cares about, what orientation you are from, what background, what race, caste, creed, gender. It's all about talent and skills. But initially, we have to drive it. Initially, the organization framework has to drive it. Just talking about it in a year or for a month, I think it's too little.
Right. So basically, all our effort should be to make the whole process of accepting the community in a lot more organic way.
Yes. Yeah. Not just about once in a while creating a buzz around and becoming rainbow colored or something like that. Not like that. It's a mindset change, and it has to be done consistently over a period of time.
Very true. Very true, Saswati. So in the end, how do you like to summarize your thoughts on the Pride Month celebration, being an important D&I initiative at work? Your end note for the show.
So I'm really passionate about this subject, so I could have gone on and on. But just to summarize, I really believe that people who, organizations who are driving these initiatives and inclusivity for this community, I think, in short, we should not look at just our short-term approach or term it as a D&I initiative, or whenever we are devising any policy, process, any program, any kind of initiative within the organization, we should keep in mind that this is a minority which can bring in a lot of advantages for the organization, and we should keep involving them at every step of what we do. It should not be a plug in and plug out approach. It should be a consistent endeavor towards changing mindsets, which might take years. But if we don't start now, it's never going to happen. So let's start with consistent approaches rather than just a month of celebration. Is my humble request.
Amazing. Thanks for your words, Saswati. So, is there a book or any podcast or movie that you want to suggest that to our listeners that they might enjoy watching or listening to that you did?
Lots and lots of them, but I don't have a favorite. What I will request our listeners to do is, and again, I come from a very practical viewpoint. What I'll request them to do is to listen to or read about case studies where including this community has resulted into ROI, return on investment, where they have seen the benefits themselves. And a lot of case studies are available in the internet, in SharePoint. So I would request that each one of you, whatever resources you have, please go ahead, Google and look at those case studies where there is a return on investment on being inclusive. It's not just about being a good human being. It's also about the benefits which are brought to the table if I look at it from the lens of an organization.
Thank you, Saswati. So after this podcast, our listeners, might want to connect to you and, have a detailed conversation or maybe another podcast. So it would be great if you can tell how our listeners can reach out to you.
Well, I'm very active in LinkedIn. So the fastest possible way to reach me is through LinkedIn.
Yes, I'll be sharing your LinkedIn link in the show notes for our show.
That would be great. And I do respond. Yeah. I make it a point to respond there.
Thank you so much for this conversation today, Saswati. Thank you for taking your time and for beautifully answering all my questions. I really appreciate that we discussed on such a sensitive issue today, and I'm sure that our listeners would love this episode. So thanks once again and hope to hear from you soon again.
Thanks a lot, Sushmita, for having me in this show. And to all the listeners out there, even a small step of yours towards inclusivity will help us move ahead as human beings and as organizations. So start today. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Vantage HR Influencers Podcast. Please do subscribe to Vantage HR Influencers Podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and our YouTube channel for new episodes.